Challenges and solutions in renewable energy project county permitting approval. So first, we got some fun stuff planned today. But first, I'll introduce our speakers here, and I'll kind of go over the state of county permitting, and then I'll kind of give you a little heads up on what we're going to be doing. So first, we'll start out with Hillary Clark with American Clean Power, where she serves as Senior Director of Siting and Permitting. We have a few people from ACP here today, and I think it's really great that they were able to make the trip out. They don't often, they can't make all of the state conferences, so I think we're pretty lucky to have them here. I look forward to hearing what she has to say about what they're seeing at the national level, and then specifically what they're doing for developers and projects in terms of local level permitting. Next up, we have Dr. Chris Olson with Olson Environmental Health Management, where he serves as lead scientist, president, vice president, CEO, CFO, lead data analyst, adjunct professor. It's one guy. He's the whole company, guys. But Dr. Olson, he's an industry leader in environmental health and risk. He's got about 25 years of consulting experience, so great to have you here today. Next, we have Alan Anderson with Polsinelli Law Firm, where he serves as chair of their energy practice group, and he is also a professor at the University of Kansas School of Law, where he teaches renewable energy law. A little bit about myself. I'm Shelby Ridenauer. I work for Olson. We're an engineering and consulting firm based here in Lincoln, as most of you probably know. I sit on what we call our environmental utility team. I've been doing renewables for about 12 years now. All types of projects, phases, county permitting included. Personally, a little twist to my experience, I guess. Personally, I grew up in a small town. I went to college here in Lincoln, and then I moved back to a small town for my job. And there I also am actively serving on a local board myself, and I've been doing that for the last few years. Now, I will say we don't have experience permitting a renewable project, but we do still deal with our fair share of very contentious issues. Notably, we did pass an ordinance in town that banned chickens. I wish it was a joke. If you guys ever go to a county meeting and you see chickens on the agenda, get out. Don't do it. All right, so challenges and solutions to county permitting approval. Challenges, I think it's pretty obvious right now, it's the opposition. And they have constricted the dialogue so much that, and it's always been lopsided, don't get me wrong, but it is to the point where it is so bad that you get people, proponents of the project, who don't even feel comfortable going to meetings, let alone standing up and speaking in favor of a project. And personally, it's sad for me because I know these people in these opposition groups, and it hurts to see because I know that they are genuinely good people, genuinely good, generally caring, nicest people you will ever meet. And when they get in that setting, they get into that mob mentality, and they have just completely basically constricted dialogue that we can't even have constructive conversations anymore. So how do we deal with that? What do we do when we're going into a public meeting to open up that dialogue again, to basically effectively demonstrate to that board that you as a developer know how to build and construct a project in a way that will ensure the health and safety and well-being of that community? So, and then the other challenge with that, how do you do that when you only have 3 minutes to speak, right? So, here's the fun part. We're gonna have a little meeting today. So we have set up our panel. We're gonna do kind of a Q&A style. And so we will have, a variety of topics. We're gonna try to cover the ones blindfold us, stick us anywhere, any county across the United States, we know what they're going to talk about. We already know what the issues are, right? So with that concept in mind of a public meeting, so we'll have all of these different topics, and they have been sort of scripted, more or less. And we've set them up in a way to come off as being misinformed and a little bit, unpleasant. But if you haven't noticed, I'm about as scary as a box full of kittens. So I have sarcasm. So that's what we're going to work with today. And if you really do hate this, it's the Canadians' fault. All right, so we'll get into our meeting here. I do have a few rules we'll have to go over. Like I said, panelists will get 3 minutes per topic. They may choose, if they don't use their entire 3 minutes, they may choose to yield a part of their time to another panelist. And if a panelist would like additional time, they may seek to yield 1 additional minute from a volunteer in the audience. Please don't help them. All right. So I will be playing our role of the antagonist today, so we'll go ahead and get started here. So, all right, Hillary, Ms. Clark. So I understand that you came here from Washington today, and I see that you work for ACP. I'm just going to say, obviously, you're paid to be here. I don't know why else you would be here, Hillary. Quite honestly, we're in the middle of the country. We know you have no interest here. And I am also imagine, given our current administration, they're probably subsidizing your whole company. Yeah, probably, yeah. So if you don't mind, Hillary, could you please tell us a little more about ACP so I can better understand just how my taxpayer dollars are being squandered?
Yeah, good morning, Shelby, and thank you for the question. It's nice to see that there is some misconceptions as to who ACP is and what we do. So despite that misconception that we are not subsidized by the government, ACP is the National Trade Association for the clean energy industry. So we are funded by our members as a member organization for the industry. We support wind, solar, and energy storage, and hydrogen gas across the U.S. in federal, state, and local policies. We support our members on all aspects. Our members come from a wide variety of sectors in the renewable energy industry, and we connect our members with some of the technical experts. What I do in the siting and permitting field and the local government engagement is I help our members connect with maybe some of the subject matter experts in the field to help them message the industry in these local communities. We develop white papers, we develop messaging, fact sheets that can be used by the public and by our members across the board. And I connect with people like Alan and Chris on these topics to make sure that we are correcting any of the misinformation that's out there.
Is that all you have to say for yourself?
This is all I have to say for myself,
Right.
but
Well,
thank you. I'm happy to yield any of my extra time, if there is any, to Alan and Chris.
I don't really want to hear it, so maybe stop. So you mentioned experts, and so I see that we have Dr. Chris Olson here. Dr. Olson, I'm curious, what kind of doctor are you exactly? Oncologist, neurologist, audiologist, what are you?
Well, thanks, Madam Chair. It's great to be here again tonight in front of the Commission. I actually have a PhD in environmental health sciences, so my role when I come to work every day is looking at things like renewable energy projects, air quality issues and the like, and proper safety and siting. So PhD, not an MD.
Okay. So if there is a medical emergency here today, he cannot save you. Call an ambulance. So, it's funny though that you're a doctor, but you still deem yourself fit to talk about human health. So now that I understand your role, why Why in the world would we trust your expert judgment when you and your friends are clearly nothing but paid shills?
Yeah, again, thank you, Madam Chair. So if we were to advance the slide there to the expert slide. So for any of you that were in the room 2 years ago, I spoke on the morning of the second morning after the big parties. So for those of you who did manage to crawl in here, and I spoke on public health and safety. And I believe during that talk 2 years ago, I actually said, if I'm involved in your project, you're probably not having a very good day. I want to switch that up a bit. And that used to be some of the thinking, is that developers would call after you might have got yourself into a little bit of trouble. And then I get a panic phone call, we got a planning commission meeting in a week. Can you get on a plane, or 2 days, or tomorrow, or tonight? Can you somehow get on a plane and come and save us? What we're seeing more and more, and I think what we need to do, is look at the group and the roster of experts and how that they interact. And I think you've heard this morning a little bit on how your PPA partnerships and bringing people like Javier and the OPPD to your meetings and that, also engaging your experts. But I'd highly recommend doing those early now. Instead of waiting until you get yourselves in trouble, instead of waiting 2 weeks before you get to your planning commission meeting. I've worked in Nebraska now for over a decade. I've been right across the state, working on mostly the wind projects at the time. We're starting to see things, the solar, you're starting to hear about those. I think the governor's letter that's in the front of the book might be a little bit challenging, saying that, no solar on farmland. I mean, it's great that we heard that, let's do all the rooftop solar and that we want, but the reality is that's not going to then meet the needs of what you saw. You don't put 1,000 megawatts on a couple of car parks, and away you go. So who do you engage? How do you engage them? You know what the topics are going to be. Property values is every single time it's property values. I don't care if it's wind, solar, battery storage. We'll get into each one of those in a little bit. But at the end of the day, you're going to have property values. Don't just say, I read a study somewhere, like developer, I'm looking at Chris Evans over here next to where you stand up. I read a study once, and then it says, the LBNL study from 2014 says there's no effect on wind turbines and property. Get somebody who's an expert in the field. There are appraisers that you can use. There are a number of people out there, people like Mike Bruce. You know that economics is going to be important. And not just saying we're going to give you X number of dollars in property value. Get somebody like SER and companies like that do the proper economic analysis, these third-party reviewers. You're going to have noise as an issue. Make sure you've got the proper noise people in the room. All of this to be said, start early. Go to the commissions before. Go to the planning commissions. You guys all like to run around and say, well, we can't go to the planning commission or anybody else first because we can't announce our project. We have all the land. The second that your land agents are in the field, everybody knows you got a project coming to town. Make sure you're engaging early and often. Arm your land people with that expertise. Let them talk to the experts, but ultimately engage the experts you're going to need well before you get to planning commission and you've dropped an application. And just very quickly on the end of this, what I'd like to say is to Carol's suggestion of having a third-party review done, absolutely. Give the county the money to do the third-party review. Help them select, here's a list of 5 engineering firms, whatever, select from. But ultimately, what you're going to be looking at there is having the county commission, the planning commission, the expertise that they can have, third party.
All right, thank you. Stop. Quit. That's enough.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Sick of that guy. All right, Professor Anderson. So our board was informed the other day that your client has been reaching out to landowners, gauging interest. Now, is what we're wondering is, as the authoritative body who would need to approve such a project, why haven't we been contacted by your client? I would think someone like you should understand how the permit process works, but now because I have absolutely zero faith in your ability to do your job, please enlighten us on your understanding of the local permitting process and why you have chosen to blatantly disregard our system.
And Madam Chair, before I start my time as a Jayhawk, I do want to say it's great to be here in Big 8 country, and so it's really, I'll start with there. So this is a thing we get all the time, and so we'll talk about this, and this it kind of even dovetails with old Dr. Olson here. And by the way, coming up with this idea, to give us some, cover, we were left unattended, and so this came out of one of those post-meeting events. But when you think about permitting, what does it mean? And so the first thing is, there is the written warrant. So if you go in, you get that CUP, you get something like that, right? So that's a permit. But is that it? No, it means permission. So if you go to the definition of permit, it's either thing. So when we think about how we're going to get to the point of getting a project permitted, we have to think of it in both ways. You need the physical document of whatever that may be, and you need permission. So then we're going to talk about how we get to that permission. And they're very different things. So the first rule of early stage development, I think we have some of the kings of early stage development. Do we know what that first rule is? There is no early stage development. The day you show up there, you've lit the fuse and it could blow up at any time, and you better be ready for that. So as Chris alluded to, we need to be ready to go on the day you start leasing, because it could get out ahead of you fast. Because here's how the project looks like to your commissioners. You're bringing a great thing, and most of them know it. It's good economically, it's good. John Hanson was here for the farmers, for the landowners, everyone else, they know it, but they're walking into this room. So you need to recognize immediately you're bringing a problem for them. And so you need to be there and be able to and be available to solve this problem. And so we're going to talk about how you do that. But you should never lose sight. It's not just, did you check a box? Did you do the things to do it? Did you do what's necessary for that commission to give you that permission? Not just the physical one, but the one that allows them to do that. So here's some thoughts. And there's, of course, many, many more that we could certainly talk about this evening over beverages or however best to do that. So whether in a zone, not zone county, however that may be, we have to get support of the decision makers. Never lose sight of that. And so with that, it's not as simply check the box. Did I show up? Did I do this? Did you do what's necessary to give them cover? If they say, I want to talk to a health expert for 6 hours one meeting, let them sit there and talk to the health experts. Make sure you have the right person. Don't just have anyone there, but make sure you have the right sound people, the right health people, the right property values, whatever that may be. But what does it take for that commission to feel that their needs were met so they can give you that permission? But it's not just simply checking the box. You have to have the right people. And again, it's the social license. So again, there's the physical permit to it, but it's the also going into a community. You are going into someone else's community, and you have to respect that. And you need to do what's necessary to make sure they can understand and be aware that it's good for them. So again, we have to go in to get the local stakeholder approval, but we also then have to have their constituents feel it's okay. People that are going to oppose it are going to do everything they can to go on the flip side of that. So go early, go often, and respect where you're going into and do what's necessary for those commissioners.
That was awful. All right, let's go back to Ms. Clark over there. So one thing that I have heard is that companies like ACP are now just shoving state siding down our throats, which would effectively revoke any of our rights as a county and impose nothing but industry favorable standards. Why would any county ever be in favor of such lunacy?
Again, another great question for industry. And I am going to just say a couple of things, and then I'm going to hand it back over to Alan to kind of elaborate. But we are seeing a national trend to opposition, and because of that, we are seeing states starting to consider putting in state-level siting policies or guidance to local communities, which can be just that. They can help local communities navigate the challenging world of permitting these projects. It also gives the opportunity to kind of level set the siting regulations, provides predictability, because industry likes to be able to know what the process is going to be. Unpredictability can be a bit of a challenge for any type of industry. And right now it feels like we're playing a little bit of a whack-a-mole across the U.S. with regards to siting of these projects. But with that, I'm going to let Alan elaborate a little bit more.
Yeah, when we look at the state siting, and I'm glad we're finally having that we're having this discussion on a policy basis around the country. If you look at natural resources and how we permit and work with natural resources and take oil and gas, we do that at the state level. And it goes back to the origin story of oil and gas. If you ever see Daniel Yergin's book, The Prize, or if you've ever seen There Will Be Blood, the reason is because it's a natural resource. It's incredibly important to the country and the states, and we wanted that level of scrutiny on it to be at the state level. So one, we protect the resource, we protect people, and we can do it most efficiently. Wind and solar and electricity are simply the same type of natural resource in the sense that it's now electricity. It's not political. It shouldn't be what it's become in many ways. But the more disruption we have for improper kind of reasons, it is harming the country. So having a state level look at it is both where we house expertise, but also where we often do natural resource reviews.
And Madam Chair, if I might, with the last minute there, state siting can be great. State siting could also be just awful. And there's just good examples of that across the board. The one thing I would suggest as an industry, I can tell you I had the distinct pleasure, if you Google my name, one of the first things that comes up is Chris Olson gets banned from talking to the Senate in Kansas because apparently I'm lie, cheat, and bastard. But, that's just one state senator's opinion. But to that, the joking aside, and after he had to recant, is that if you have there are some states where state senators or state house members are looking to ban renewable energy, whether it's solar, wind, or battery storage, and they try to do it by a state siting bill. So you do have to be careful one way or another. Like if you're going to do this, and if you think about in Nebraska, not saying you have to, it's getting together as a group to make sure that you can, put something proper in front of both the houses.
Thanks, I think. All right. I guess while you have the microphone, Dr. Olson, doctor, still funny. As we talk about ordinances and proper siting, I think it goes without saying that when developing any sort of industrial scale facility, they come with significant health impacts. Please explain how you go about determining what is an appropriate setback, knowing you personally will not be burdened with living next to these monstrosities. Obviously, you need at least 2 miles.
So again, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure if we're in a battery storage, a solar or wind hearing right now, but it pretty much applies. If we go to the next slide, please, Alan. It used to be in the past, we would be a lot more passive as an industry on calling bullshit. Just say it right there outright, okay? That when people came to meetings, that we would sit politely, we'd listen for hours on end, and we'd try to do something nice and polite back. You guys are all, polite Nebraskans, and you don't want to stir the pot too much. The reality now is I do believe that a lot of people, when they come to the meetings, they are genuine, and they get fearful, right? Whether it's a solar project and property values, whether it's battery storage and fire, you go on the internet, and unfortunately, my name is not always the first thing appears on public health and safety in these. Sometimes it's near the top, but at the end of the day, they come with genuine, just misinformation. That said, we also know that, every one of your projects, there's going to be a small group that are going to come armed with 4-inch binders, and they're going to say, I've, just submitted all this. And we spent far too little time just placating that. So where I believe that you need to do is when you're going to face this issue in Nebraska. There's no way, and I think, we heard about the solar project, the Platteview earlier this morning. Planning Commission, I believe, voted it down 5-1 before it got to County Commission. There was opposition. It's going to be everywhere. Wait for your battery storage. You want to put in a 200 megawatt battery storage, wait for the death and destruction of fire and everything else. So go in, talk to the planning staff first, talk to the county commissioners, get things organized so that you know what's happening within that. Be prepared. Do the town halls. As Alan was saying, you've got to give them cover, right? So for any of the county commissioners that are in the room, or if there are some, we always say is that it's the role of the company that's coming in to propose the project. I don't like the word educate. What it is to facilitate the discussion and then have, put meaningful facts on the table. But you've got to give the county commissioners that cover. The public are going to want to come. They're going to want to be angry. Have a town hall meeting. Put the right people who actually are comfortable in public getting yelled at. Some of us get paid to do that for a living. Put them up front and just answer every question. 3-4 hours. Go all night. Right? We've been in town. Alan and I have been in town halls that'll go 2, 3, 4, 5 hours. I'm here all night. The running joke. If we go to the next one, Alan. And so how do you do proper siting? So again, whether it's, battery storage, that was an excellent question, I think, out of the folks from Minnesota. Nobody knows how to do proper storage, regulations right now, just because it's all over the map. And it's all over the map in the same state, different counties. Some people will tell you, I think we heard, I believe it was Eric or someone this morning saying, well, they're often in industrial facilities. Not anymore. Some of you folks are liking to put these things right in neighborhoods almost these days. You got to deal with the sound. You got to deal with shadow flicker. You got to deal with all of the things you got to deal with. Go to the counties early. You're going to get an ordinance change. You know it's going to happen. Go in early, go in often, have those discussions, and that's, I think, the best way that you can look at for trying to get some
All right,
restitution.
that's, shut your gob. These guys. All right, so Professor Allen, I would love to get your opinion here. You know, given Dr. Olson's recommendations are essentially garbage and do not appropriately protect or consider non-participating landowners, how do we justify these unfair setbacks to our non-participating landowners? Now, I will remind you that we are all well aware of our personal freedoms as outlined in the 14th Amendment, ensuring property rights. Even with setbacks to these projects are not, or to say these projects are not an infringement of non-participating landowners is simply absurd. What do you have to say?
So this is going to be a good topic. So if I could get someone to cede a minute. David Brock, would you cede one of your minutes to me
David,
as part of this?
No.
I seek my minute to you, and for those that are interested, I drive a Prius with Hawaii plates. Hawaii plates.
Freaking lawyers sticking together.
Perfect. And I will say before my time starts, of course, you're really fortunate in Nebraska. You have two of the best lawyers that do this in the country with David Brock and David Levy, and I will say that is just a gift in the industry, so we'll start there. So as part of this, I'm going to call it, property rights and when did we lose our damn mind? So I really want to thank you for opening that up with a question that shows the inversion of property rights. And we'll do a little walk down the memory lane of the country and its formation here. So it gets a little academic, but I think you'll kind of appreciate as we go through this. So the first thing you mentioned is, does the United States care about our property rights? Do we care at all about this? And is it important? Well, we put it in twice. We put in the Fifth Amendment and the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment applies to states, the Fifth to the federal government. And we said that we're not going to deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process. We put property in there along with life and liberty. We cared a lot about that. But does Nebraska care? Well, they put almost the same part into their constitution, that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So from the foundation of the country, we determined protection of property was a critical element to our formation. And I was just having a great conversation with John Hanson yesterday, and part of that, and we can do this for hours, but it's Madison in Federalist Paper number 10 even gets into this topic at the formation and the writing of our different formation documents. And that is that he was afraid, and they were afraid, that there would be groups of people that would take away property rights from their neighbors. And that's the Federalist Paper number 10 we can talk about as long as anyone wants to. But what about the neighbor's property rights? So that's the part that comes up. And here's where we invert what property rights are. So first of all, it starts with we can't impact their health and safety. So that we know. And so we have to do that. And that's where we cite them properly. If we don't cite them properly, then someone does have a valid and appropriate complaint. But so you'll hear it like this, your property rights end at my property line. The famous saying, your right swing, the right swing my fist ends at your nose, that concept. You'll hear that repeatedly. So what does that mean in this context? It does not mean that one person gets to that they get to look at their neighbor's property. You'll hear that. I bought my house and I want to look over here at the property the way it is now. That's crazy. In the formation of the country, we didn't think that I bought the rights to look at your property when I buy my parcel. So it doesn't mean, it's never meant in our country that someone buys a piece of property, they can have no noise, no sound, no smells. That's farming. From the formation of the country when we thought about it, of course you have activity on your property, and it was always meant to be that way. So when people say they want to look at your property the way they want, they're not coming paying the mortgage on the farm if it doesn't have a good year. So when they do that, it is absolute inversion of property rights. Again, it has to be health and safety, but beyond that, it does not. And I'll give you kind of an example. So the first one is this property right here. This property is a neighbor. They have 80 acres. There's a little lake on it, and they play on it. These are native grasses that were put in there for different reasons. So that's what they want to do on this property. So they have it. It's an area for recreation, their own personal use. They just want to use it that way. It doesn't have a home on it. It's for that purpose. The neighbors, you can see if you look at the top there, and that's the same property just in the fall, and you see it borders a farming, an area where there's corn. There was corn this past year. This is just from a few weeks ago. And that area has corn. So the person who wants to just have leisurely activity on their ground would say, I don't want you to farm that ground. I have sound, I have smells, there's activity, I get shadows, I get all those things, but we would never think to tell the person you can't farm on that land because you want to look at your land that way. We have to think of it also in the reverse. The person wants to house wind or solar for their economic benefits when it's healthy and safe. They should not, under a property rights perspective, get to tell them no to that. So I'll just quickly get to this part, because what system uses government to take natural resources? There's a political ideology where the government owns all the natural resources. That is actually communism. And so when someone goes to their county commission and tells them, I want you to take my neighbor's property rights away, and then they'll of course say, well, I'm not a communist, of course that is the form. And so when someone does that, just keep that in mind. When we look at the property rights and the free markets, we need to respect that.
You're done.
Yeah.
You're done. Thank you. Not thank you. All right, well, that concludes our meeting today.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. It's come to my attention that this meeting was not properly noticed and is in contravention of the Open Meetings Act. Therefore, everything said tonight is invalid.
Biscuits. Well, I guess we'll just do this all again in 2 weeks. So, thank you. Thank you all for playing along. We have about 15 minutes left. They would love to take any of your questions. Anybody? Right up here.
So in a situation where a jurisdiction doesn't have zoning, two-part question actually. What's your recommendation for engaging with the community or with the commission? And then on the flip side, what's the jurisdiction's authority to halt your project? Or what's the detriment that they could cause to you?
Yeah, so this is one of the more interesting things. So a county that has chosen not to have zoning, which is a choice, and we have to kind of remember that. So what they're saying is, again, any use has to be healthy and safe, but beyond that, we as a county have determined we're not going to pick and choose among land uses. That's what it means to not have zoning. And again, it's a conscious choice, because any county knows how to add zoning, but they've chosen not to. So in that case, you start with a reminder, generally from someone like David Brock, who can go in there and remind them, just from a legal perspective, you're not picking and choosing amongst land uses. So if you don't like wind or solar, that's fine, but you don't pick and choose. So we have to cite it in a healthy way, in a safe way, but you're not picking and choosing. Now that's the law on the books. The law in action is if they want to cause trouble, and it happens all the time, they sometimes try to do that. So the engaging in an unzoned county often is as rigorous or more than a zoned county, because you need to do the same thing to get that social license. You need to bring experts, you need to make them feel it's okay, you need to give them cover. It's almost more wild and woolly in an unzoned county than it does in a zoned county. So your working with the county is often more difficult. You can put development agreements in place to show you'll site it appropriately. You can do all the things you can do to give that county comfort, and you try to hope they have the bounds of the law that keep them from going astray, and then you have to do all those same things in either zoned or unzoned county to make them feel comfortable that the project's going to be okay.
Anybody else? I think we got somebody in the back here. Corner. Got one over there. Hold on.
Are you seeing the same amount of pushback when it's like a community-owned solar project? And I'm just curious, like, if you were to empower the local community where maybe there's an option for the landowners to own the project, if there would be the same amount of pushback. Some of the items on the screen that were listed there, it seems like maybe they're symptoms of the underlying problem where they, I think just the local community would like to be empowered, and there's things that they don't like, and so they're grasping for straws, trying to bring up health issues. But I personally see, certain people that will throw the health aspect in there, but they've never mentioned health on anything else. So it's probably not their primary issue, but they're just kind of grasping for straws, and there's other things that they don't like but aren't being mentioned. So just curious if you could have some input.
So I think with community solar, first thing is you're usually talking very small scale, right? You're talking megawatt, 2 megawatts, maybe you get crazy and you go up to 5. I can tell you that I've worked on community solar projects that are just as contentious because not everybody in the community wants a community solar project. The other thing with community solar projects is they are typically within the community. And you will have houses bordering kind of all the way around. There's a lot of people who do not like community solar either. And I think you're right. Like, I mean, in terms of when does health come up, it really is typically, you know, as Alan says, view shed, of course, we talk about wind turbines and everybody says, well, view shed is a wind turbine issue. Solar, there are more people on a solar that don't want to see the view shed of a solar or think they don't want to see that. Now you talk about 200 C crates for battery storage, we get into all the same issues. So you're right, I think you get worried about property values, and I think it is a valid concern, right? What was it, a couple of years ago, we're in Reno County, Kansas, in a 5-day, 500-person hearing, and that was the famous, your former president came out and said, wind turbines cause cancer, they kill all the birds, your property value is going to go down 70%. And then we had to spend the next 4 days explaining to people why that wasn't the case. So I think community solar can be, but you know, and I defer to Alan, but the large scale solar that I think, you know, when we're talking 200, 300, 400, 500 megawatt solar projects, I don't think there's a lot of, I don't think communities can really get involved. Although there are some states where there is, you can pay into a fund to receive cash back, but.
Yeah, I mean, when people participate, it helps, whether that's even participating in a project. So, you know, that's what you see. People will do agreements with people who don't have infrastructure on their projects. Kind of has a similar impact. The more people that participate, the better. Community solar usually is smaller unless it's done through the utility where you can do a large-scale project where they can do it through a program. But then it's their entire rate payers as opposed to the local community. So if you go back to the origin story of Nebraska, which I was at the first Nebraska conference in 07, 08, and that was when Nebraska was just opening up, it started with a thing called community-based energy development, which David Brock will remember well. And that's what it was intended to do, is require participation by local folks in wind projects. And it has its benefits. When we think about the grid and what we're going to need, because I'm going to tell you that the newest, greatest story is our demand for energy is going to go up by so much. We need it all. So community solar would be great, but it can't solve all of it.
Thank you. David?
Kind of following along on that point, Alan, a comment that's come up in almost every zoning meeting I've been at lately is, where is that power going? And why are we producing power for all of these other people? Now that's usually in counties that have on the order of 5 to 10 times more cows than people. I think there's a contrast, and so I'm kind of curious about that. And then more broadly, and something that maybe Chris brought up, is the dueling experts, that is experts that I know I've historically relied on, and those that are experts from 30 Minutes on Google and how you've dealt with that. So first on the local benefit versus long, and then experts.
Yeah, and this does come up all the time because most places in the Midwest that have a good resource are doing a lot of project, and there's a kind of a longer discussion that I'll often do with a county or a state to talk about how the grid works and those kind of things. But the first part, there's two parts of this. One is the same thing with agricultural uses. If you have corn or you have wheat or you have soybeans or whatever it may be that you're producing, that's not all used locally either. So it's the first in a capitalist, free market system. We allow people to utilize their land in order to even create export a product. That's the same thing with electricity. So that's the first part. The second part is when we inject low-cost electricity into the grid, because wherever a project's located, it will be injected into the grid, even if it has a off-taker elsewhere, either through a commercial buyer or the utility. More low-cost energy into the grid is good for everyone on ratepayers because it just creates, it's simple economics, more supply of low-cost energy. So even if the local load doesn't need all of that energy, it'll benefit the overall price for the electricity they need. So the first part is we want to respect the free market and allow people to have export just as we do with agriculture. And the second is it actually does benefit the grid. Even if the local co-op is not the buyer, that'll mean that local co-op or the G&T co-op or whoever's they're working with has optionality of more low-cost power that benefits the price. So it is good for the grid, not to mention all the economic benefits that you could have and show from payments, and so just enormous other economic benefits to the community.
And I think, David, to your second question, it comes back to what I was saying earlier, is that don't drop your own experts in 5 minutes before the your first hearing. Often I'll spend, in the last 6 months, I've been to Yankton County, South Dakota, probably 15 times. And, when you're there and, first of all, it's the credibility. So who are you bringing? Make sure you're bringing people who have testified under oath in state hearings or courts and the like. The same consistent message over and over again. Obviously, joking around a little bit here on the table, but, being very respectful to the people in the room and knowing that. But at the flip side, there are, quote unquote experts. The number of times I've had to deal with physicians or had, the noise guys have to deal with, their noise counterparts that will tell you everything I say is crap. And it's just kind of easing your way in, but it's trying to gain the trust of the county commissioners, the planning board, the planning administrator, in order to convince them that, you're here, you're saying the same thing time and time again. I've been involved in over 20 gigawatts of renewable energy that's in the ground now across the US. It's being able to bring that credible side of things, but also being empathetic. I come from a long line of farmers. I understand when people don't necessarily want this in their backyard, but it's just being there, not just dropping somebody in at your planning commission meeting, or even worse, at the county commission meeting after you lost a planning commission, right? So making sure you got there a long time.
Can we pop over here for a question?
Yep, go ahead.
Hi, excuse me. And a question about thinking about the messenger and what the experience that you all have had of coming out being the absolute experts. If I grew up on a farm not far from Lincoln, I think of my family and the extended of here are the people that I don't trust if somebody's coming to build something. And number one is the developer. Number two is their fancy lawyers and consultants. And number three, and actually maybe number one, is the federal government, which is who I work for now. So just to throw myself in there too. But so just thinking about that, have you thought about those type, strategies around that of who are credible spokespeople and supporters with history in the community? And does that make a difference?
I think you raise a good point. So, and this is, I know ACP is looking at a lot of this, and how do we message and who can be that messenger? And you're right, a lot of those, when you think about the trust level of who that may be, it's a challenge we have. So the answer is it's all the above. You need messaging that comes from a number of different sources. We're focused on the experts here, and because it is a part of the equation, a critical part of the equation, because the way you handle that, part of the way you handle this commission dealing with opposition is you answer their questions so thoroughly they know they've been answered appropriately. So that's an important part of the equation. It's not the only one. So you try to get that information and support coming from a multitude of sources. I'll give an example of one I'm kind of excited about. I'd like to see replicated. Purdue Extension, so going through the extension, a trusted source usually in most states, is also working on that to provide good information so that counties can rely upon that. So you try to find a source like that that's independent. It is with a university, but it's the extension office that then works in rural areas and usually in every county in whatever state it's located. So you try to find other bodies to do
So
that.
Alan, I'm going to jump in on top of you there because I know we're getting short of time. Some of the best ones as well. Again, as Alan said, we play some role. At the end of the day, one of the best groups that you can bring to these county meetings is a local operator. So if you've got your operations manager from the wind project just down the way, or your operations manager of the solar, because you've got these typically guys, but there are women, of course, that are in that role as well. These people that you can bring who live in the state, probably a couple counties over, and that's what they do every day, day in, day out. I could sit there and tell you about fires all day long. I could sit there and tell you about blade failure, EMF, whatever have you. But when you've got the local operations manager coming in, as well as find your best supportive landowners. I spent a lot of time speaking with supportive landowners, trying to get them up to speed so that they can talk to their neighbors and say, well, I've heard that this is going to happen. They say, well, no, this is what we understand. So it is that mix of everybody. Yeah, if you just show up at a county with a few experts, a few lawyers, good luck. You're never going to get your permit. But yeah, it is working with all of those groups to make sure that you're coming to a conclusion.